Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished checking the cornfields under the blazing afternoon sun. His farm stretched across 300 acres of prime Iowa soil, a legacy passed down from his grandfather. The drought had been harsh this year, but his crops were surviving better than most thanks to the new irrigation system he'd installed. As he walked back toward the farmhouse, something caught his eye near the old oak tree by the pond. A large, dark shape lay motionless in the shade. Marcus squinted, thinking it might be a sick cow that had wandered from the neighbor's property. But as he got closer, his blood ran cold. The creature was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It stood nearly 8 feet tall even while lying on its side, with dark green scales that shimmered like emeralds in the dappled sunlight. Its body was reptilian but walked upright like a human, with powerful legs and arms that ended in clawed hands. Most striking was its head, elongated like a crocodile's but with large, intelligent golden eyes that tracked his movement. Marcus stopped 20 feet away, his heart pounding. The creature's breathing was labored, and he could see its ribs showing through the scales. It was clearly starving. Worse, he noticed the swollen belly that indicated pregnancy. Whatever this being was, it was carrying young and desperately needed help. The farmer's instincts kicked in. He'd spent his whole life caring for animals, and suffering was suffering regardless of the species. He'd seen that same look of desperation in the eyes of countless farm animals over the years. The creature's golden eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human, pleading silently for help. Marcus slowly backed away and jogged to his house. His wife Sarah had taken their kids to visit her mother in Des Moines for the week, leaving him alone on the farm. He grabbed several packages of raw beef from the freezer, some vegetables, and a large basin of fresh water. His hands shook as he loaded everything into his pickup truck. When he returned to the oak tree, the creature had managed to lift its head. Those golden eyes followed him as he parked the truck a safe distance away. Marcus stepped out slowly, holding his hands visible and empty. "Easy there, girl," he said softly, using the same gentle tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm here to help." He placed the food and water within the creature's reach, then stepped back. The alien hesitated for a moment, studying him with those piercing eyes. Then hunger overcame caution. She devoured the raw meat with frightening speed, using razor-sharp teeth to tear through the packages. She drank nearly the entire basin of water. When she finished eating, the creature looked directly at Marcus. To his amazement, she pressed one clawed hand to her chest, then extended it toward him in what seemed like a gesture of gratitude. The intelligence in those eyes was unmistakable. This was no mere animal. This was a sentient being. Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon bringing more food and water. With each trip, the creature seemed to grow stronger. By evening, she was able to sit upright against the oak tree. She watched him with curious eyes as he went about his evening chores, never showing aggression, only gratitude. As night fell, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He brought out several old blankets and a camping lantern, setting them near the tree. The creature tilted her head in what might have been confusion or surprise. "You're safe here," Marcus said, though he doubted she understood his words. "I'll check on you in the morning." The alien pulled the blankets around herself with surprising delicacy, careful not to tear them with her claws. As Marcus walked back to his house, he could feel those golden eyes watching him go. He paused at his back door and looked over his shoulder. In the soft glow of the lantern, he could see her still sitting upright, one clawed hand protectively placed over her swollen belly. That night, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling. What had he gotten himself into? Should he call the authorities? But what would they do to her? The thought of government scientists experimenting on a pregnant being made his stomach turn. No, he'd keep this secret, at least until he figured out what was best for everyone involved. Outside his window, he could see the faint glow of the lantern by the oak tree. For the first time in months, Marcus felt like he was doing something truly important. He'd always believed that kindness was the most human trait of all. And tomorrow he'd find out if he was right. Sleep finally took him as dawn approached, and in his dreams he saw golden eyes filled with gratitude and intelligence, watching over his farm like a guardian angel with scales and claws. Marcus woke before sunrise, his mind immediately racing to thoughts of his unexpected guest. He quickly dressed and headed outside with fresh water and more food. The morning air was crisp, and dew covered everything like tiny diamonds. As he approached the oak tree, he was surprised to find the alien standing upright, Stretching her powerful limbs in what looked like morning exercises, she moved with fluid grace despite her obvious pregnancy, and Marcus realized she was much taller than he'd initially thought, probably close to 9 feet when fully upright. When she noticed him approaching, she performed that same gesture from yesterday, pressing her clawed hand to her chest and extending it toward him. This time, she also made a series of soft clicking and humming sounds that Marcus assumed was her way of speaking. He set down the food and water and watched in fascination as she ate more slowly than the day before. Her desperate hunger had clearly been satisfied, and now she was eating with more control. After finishing her meal, she did something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. The alien reached into what appeared to be a small pouch or fold in her scales near her hip and withdrew a small, crystalline object. It was roughly the size of a smartphone but seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. She held it toward Marcus, making gentle clicking sounds. Marcus cautiously stepped closer and accepted the object. It was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate with energy. The moment his fingers made contact, images flashed through his mind. He saw vast starships traveling between distant worlds, cities of crystalline spires reaching toward alien suns, and creatures like his visitor living in harmony with technology he couldn't begin to understand. The visions were brief but overwhelming. When they ended, Marcus found himself sitting on the ground, the crystal still in his hands. The alien was watching him with concern, and he realized she had somehow shared her memories with him. "You're not from around here, are you?" he said with a shaky laugh, though he now understood the question was ridiculous. She was from so far away that the distance couldn't be measured in any terms he could comprehend. The alien made more clicking sounds, and somehow Marcus found himself understanding fragments of meaning. Not words exactly, but concepts and emotions. She was grateful. She was afraid. She was alone, very far from home, and her time was running short. Over the following hours, Marcus learned more through this strange form of communication. Her name was something like Ziraath, though his human throat couldn't properly pronounce it. She was an explorer from a civilization that had been traveling the stars for millennia. Her ship had been damaged in what he gathered was some kind of space storm, forcing her to crash land on Earth. The worst part was that her people would be coming to look for her, but they wouldn't know where to search. Space was vast, and her ship's distress beacon had been destroyed in the crash. She was stranded on a primitive world, pregnant and alone with no way to contact her people. Marcus felt a deep ache in his chest as he absorbed her situation. He'd always been a problem solver, the type of farmer who could fix any piece of broken machinery or nurse any sick animal back to health. But this was beyond anything he'd ever faced. Throughout the day, he continued bringing her food and water, and she seemed to grow stronger with each meal. By afternoon, she was able to walk around the oak tree, though she moved carefully to protect her unborn young. Marcus estimated she was equivalent to about 7 months pregnant in human terms. As evening approached, Ziraath became agitated. She kept looking up at the sky and making urgent clicking sounds. When Marcus touched the crystal device she'd given him, he understood her distress. Her ship's automated systems were still partially functional, and they were detecting something in orbit. Other ships were coming. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Were these her people coming to rescue her, or were they something else entirely? The way Ziraath was behaving suggested she wasn't sure either. As the sun set, they both stood by the oak tree looking up at the stars. Marcus had never felt more aware of how small his farm was in the vastness of space, or how much his simple act of kindness might have changed everything. In the distance, he could see lights moving across the sky that definitely weren't airplanes or satellites. Whatever was coming had arrived, and Marcus realized that tomorrow would bring answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. Ziraath placed a gentle clawed hand on his shoulder, and through the crystal's connection, he felt her gratitude mixed with fear. She was trying to tell him that he should run, that he should hide, that whatever happened next might be dangerous for a human. But Marcus had never been the type to abandon someone who needed help, and he wasn't about to start now. Whatever came tomorrow, they would face it together. Marcus barely slept that night, checking the sky every few minutes through his bedroom window. The strange lights had disappeared sometime after midnight, but he could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. At dawn, he rushed outside with food for Ziraath, only to find her pacing anxiously near the oak tree. Her golden eyes were fixed on the eastern horizon, and her normally graceful movements had become sharp and alert. When she saw him approaching, she made urgent clicking sounds and pointed toward the sky. Marcus followed her gaze and felt his blood run cold. 3 metallic objects were descending through the morning clouds, clearly not of human origin. They were sleek and angular, with surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. As they drew closer, he could see they were much smaller than he'd expected. Maybe the size of large trucks rather than the massive starships he'd seen in Zira-Ath's memories. The ships landed in his cornfield with surprising gentleness, barely disturbing the crops. Steam hissed from their hulls as they settled into the earth. For several long minutes nothing happened. Then, with sounds like whispers, hatches opened on each vessel. What emerged made Marcus's heart sink into his stomach. The beings that stepped out looked similar to Zira-Ath in basic shape, but everything about them radiated menace. Their scales were darker, almost black, and their eyes glowed red instead of gold. They wore what appeared to be armor made from the same flowing metal as their ships, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. Marcus counted 12 of them total, 4 from each ship. They moved in perfect coordination, spreading out across his field in a tactical formation he recognized from war movies. These were soldiers, not explorers. Zira-Ath made a sound that was half hiss, half moan. Through the crystal connection, Marcus felt her terror wash over him. These weren't her people coming to rescue her. These were something else entirely, something she'd been hoping to avoid. The lead soldier raised one of the energy weapons and spoke in the same clicking language Zira-Ath used, but his tone was harsh and commanding. Even without understanding the words, Marcus could tell it was a demand for surrender. Zira-Ath straightened to her full height and replied with defiant clicks of her own. Marcus felt her resolve through their connection. She was telling them to leave, that this world was under her protection. The concept confused him until he realized what she was doing. She was claiming Earth as her territory to keep them away from the humans. The soldier leader laughed, a sound like grinding metal that made Marcus's teeth ache. He raised his weapon toward Zira-Ath, and Marcus knew he was about to watch her die. That's when something inside Marcus snapped. He'd spent 3 days caring for this pregnant being, watching her gratitude and intelligence, feeling her fear and hope through their strange connection. She'd shared her memories with him, trusted him with the crystal device, and now she was trying to protect his entire species with her life. Marcus stepped out from behind the oak tree and placed himself directly between the soldiers and Zira-Ath. "No," he said in a voice that carried across the field. "You're on my land. She's under my protection." The soldiers stopped, clearly surprised by the appearance of a human. The leader tilted his reptilian head, studying Marcus with those burning red eyes. He said something in their language that sounded like a question. Marcus didn't have the crystal with him. It was back in his pocket, but somehow he found himself understanding the basic meaning. The soldier was asking what a primitive being could possibly do against superior technology and training. "Maybe nothing," Marcus admitted, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "But this is my farm and she's my guest. Where I come from, we protect our guests." He thought about all the stories his grandfather had told him about standing up to bullies, about the importance of doing what's right even when you're scared. He thought about every movie he'd ever seen where humans refused to back down in the face of impossible odds. The soldier leader made what might have been a laugh and raised his weapon toward Marcus instead. The energy weapon hummed as it charged, building to what would clearly be a killing shot. That's when Zira-Ath moved. Despite her pregnancy, she was faster than Marcus could follow. In one fluid motion, she scooped him up in her powerful arms and dove behind the massive oak tree, just as the energy beam seared through the space where they'd been standing. The smell of ozone and burned earth filled the air. Marcus found himself pressed against Zira-Ath's scaled chest, feeling her heart racing beneath the armor-like skin. She was making soft clicking sounds that he somehow knew meant apologies. She was sorry for getting him involved, sorry for bringing danger to his peaceful farm. "Don't apologize," Marcus whispered, surprised by his own calm. "We're in this together now." Through the crystal connection that seemed to work even without touching the device, he felt Zira-Ath's amazement. In all her travels across the galaxy, she'd never encountered a species willing to protect strangers at the cost of their own safety. The soldiers were advancing across the field, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Marcus knew they had maybe minutes before they were overwhelmed. But as he looked into Zirath's golden eyes, he saw something new there. Hope. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she wasn't facing this alone. A human had chosen to stand with her, and that simple act of solidarity seemed to give her strength she didn't know she possessed. Marcus didn't know how they were going to survive the next few minutes, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let them hurt a pregnant being on his watch, no matter what species she belonged to or what technology the soldiers possessed. Sometimes, being human meant standing up for what's right, even when the odds were impossible. Marcus pressed his back against the oak tree's rough bark as another energy blast scorched the air above their heads. The soldiers were getting closer, their footsteps crushing his corn plants as they advanced in their methodical formation. "We need a plan," Marcus whispered to Zirath. Through their crystal connection, he felt her agreement, but also her despair. She was exhausted from pregnancy and days of starvation. Even at full strength, she couldn't fight 12 armed soldiers alone. That's when Marcus remembered something his grandfather had always said. "Son, when you can't outfight someone, you outthink them." He looked around his property with new eyes, seeing not just a farm but a battlefield where he had every advantage. Marcus knew every inch of this land. He knew where the irrigation ditches were hidden by tall grass, where the old well cover was loose and dangerous to step on, and where his grandfather had buried the remnants of an old root cellar that was now just a hidden hole waiting to trap unwary feet. "Can you make it to the barn?" he asked Zirath quietly. She nodded, understanding his meaning through their connection. "Good. When I say run, head straight there. I'll meet you inside." Before she could protest, Marcus grabbed his grandfather's old hunting horn from his belt, something he'd carried out of habit while doing farm work. He took a deep breath and let out the loudest blast he could manage. The soldiers stopped advancing, clearly confused by the strange sound. In the distance, Marcus could hear his neighbor's dogs barking in response, and he smiled grimly. Old Bill. Henderson was a Vietnam veteran who'd shoot first and ask questions later if he thought Marcus was in trouble. But Marcus wasn't counting on rescue. He was counting on misdirection. "Now," he whispered to Zirath, and they both broke from cover. Zirath moved with surprising speed toward the barn despite her condition, while Marcus ran in the opposite direction toward his house. The soldiers hesitated for a crucial second, unsure which target to pursue. That hesitation saved both their lives. Marcus had deliberately chosen a path that led the soldiers through the most treacherous part of his property. The first soldier stepped directly onto the loose well cover his grandfather had always meant to fix. With a splintering crack, the cover gave way, and the soldier disappeared into the 12-foot deep well with a splash and a very unhuman-sounding roar of anger. The second soldier tried to leap over the hidden irrigation ditch, but misjudged the distance in Earth's gravity. He landed hard on the far side, his ankle twisting with an audible snap. Marcus reached his porch and dove behind the solid oak pillars his great-grandfather had installed. Energy blasts seared the wood around him, but the thick timber held. He grabbed his grandfather's old hunting rifle from beside the door, not because he thought it would hurt the alien soldiers, but because he needed them to think he was a threat. The shot echoed across the farmland like thunder, and though the bullet merely bounced off the lead soldier's armor, it had the desired effect. The aliens took cover and began treating him like a real enemy, rather than an amusing primitive. That gave Zirath the time she needed to reach the barn. Marcus had always been proud of that barn. His grandfather had built it to withstand Iowa, tornadoes with walls 3 feet thick and a foundation that went down 8 feet. What the soldiers didn't know was that it also contained something his grandfather had salvaged from an old military base, a genuine World War II emergency radio set that still worked perfectly. Through their crystal connection, Marcus felt Zirath's amazement as she discovered the radio equipment. Her own ship's communication systems had been damaged in the crash, but her people's technology could interface with almost any electromagnetic device. While Marcus continued to draw the soldiers' attention with sporadic rifle shots and strategic retreats through his property's natural obstacles, Zirath was working frantically to modify the radio. Her clawed hands moved with precise delicacy, connecting crystalline components from her damaged equipment to the old Earth technology. The soldiers were learning to navigate his traps, but Marcus had slowed them down enough for what Zyrath needed to accomplish. Through their connection, he felt the moment when she successfully activated the modified radio and sent out a distress signal on frequencies that could reach across the galaxy. But he also felt her despair when she realized the truth. Even if her people received the signal, they were weeks away at best. The soldiers surrounding the farm would finish their hunt long before rescue could arrive. Marcus was down to his last few hiding spots when he heard something that made his heart leap with hope. In the distance, the sound of approaching helicopters echoed across the Iowa sky. His blast on the hunting horn had apparently been heard by more than just the neighbors. The soldiers heard it too, and their formation wavered with uncertainty. They were equipped to handle primitive weapons and simple tactics, but they weren't prepared for the full attention of Earth's military forces. That moment of distraction was all Marcus needed. He sprinted across the open ground toward the barn, zigzagging to avoid the energy blasts that followed him. He could feel the heat of the beams as they passed close enough to singe his clothes. He dove through the barn doors just as Zyrath caught him in her powerful arms. Through their connection, he felt her relief and something else: pride. She was proud of him, of his cleverness and courage, of his refusal to abandon her despite the impossible odds. "What now?" Marcus gasped, catching his breath. Through the crystal connection, Zyrath showed him what she had accomplished. The modified radio wasn't just sending a distress signal to her people, it was also broadcasting on every emergency frequency on Earth. Military forces around the globe were about to learn that they were not alone in the universe. The soldiers outside had minutes before Earth's defenses would mobilize against them, but they still had enough time to storm the barn and complete their mission. Marcus looked around his grandfather's workshop, seeing tools and equipment with new eyes. If they were going to survive the next few minutes, he'd need every trick his farming ancestors had ever learned about defending their land. "Time to show these guys what humans do to people who threaten pregnant ladies on our property," Marcus said with a grim smile. Zyrath made a sound that might have been alien laughter. Through their connection, he felt her amazement at human audacity. In the vast galaxy she'd explored, she'd never met a species quite like this, one that would declare war on superior forces simply because it was the right thing to do. Outside, the sound of helicopters was getting louder, and the soldiers were regrouping for their final assault. Marcus gripped his grandfather's old wrench like a weapon and prepared to defend his barn with everything he had. The barn doors exploded inward as the soldiers blasted through with their energy weapons. Marcus threw himself behind his grandfather's old tractor, while Zyrath took cover behind a massive grain storage bin. The air filled with the smell of burned wood and ozone. 3 soldiers rushed through the opening, their red eyes scanning the interior. Marcus could hear the helicopters directly overhead now, their rotors thundering like mechanical storms. Through the crystal connection, he felt Zyrath's hope rising as Earth's military forces surrounded the farm. The lead soldier barked orders in their clicking language, and the other 2 began to flank around the tractor. Marcus knew he had seconds before they would have a clear shot at him. That's when he remembered the old fuel tank his grandfather had installed for the farm equipment. It was nearly full of diesel, and there was a manual release valve right next to where he was crouched. Marcus yanked the valve open with all his strength. Diesel fuel began flooding across the barn floor, spreading rapidly toward the alien soldiers. They stopped their advance, clearly confused by this new development. "Zyrath," Marcus shouted. "Can you make a spark with that energy of yours?" Through their connection, he felt her understanding. She raised one clawed hand and crystalline components in her damaged equipment began to glow. The aliens raised their weapons toward her, but they were standing ankle-deep in diesel fuel now. When Zyrath released the energy burst, the barn floor erupted in flames. The soldiers scrambled backward toward the doors, their armor protecting them from the fire but clearly not designed for this kind of hazard. Marcus and Zyrath pressed themselves against the far wall, where his grandfather had wisely installed stone flooring near the grain storage to prevent exactly this kind of fire from spreading. Through the smoke and flames, Marcus could see the soldiers retreating to regroup outside, but he could also hear new sounds, the distinctive whine of helicopter, Gunships and the rumble of heavy vehicles approaching fast. Attention, unidentified aircraft and personnel. A voice boomed from loudspeakers overhead. You are surrounded by United States military forces. Power down your weapons and surrender immediately. Marcus felt grim satisfaction. The cavalry had arrived, just like in the old movies his grandfather used to love. But through the crystal connection, he also felt Zirath's growing concern. These soldiers weren't the type to surrender, and Earth's military had no idea what they were facing. Good people were about to die because of a conflict they didn't understand. The lead soldier's voice echoed across the farmyard as he responded to the military's demands. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clearly defiant. Through Zirath's memories, he caught fragments of meaning. Something about primitive species having no authority over superior beings. That's when the shooting started. The alien energy weapons made sounds like tearing fabric as they fired at the helicopters. Marcus heard the distinctive crack of human gunfire responding, followed by the deeper boom of heavier weapons. Through the barn's windows, he could see tracers lighting up the early morning sky. We have to stop this, Marcus said urgently to Zirath. Both sides are going to get hurt. Through their connection, he felt her agreement but also her helplessness. She was one pregnant explorer against 12 trained soldiers, with her own people weeks away and Earth's forces completely unprepared for this kind of conflict. That's when Marcus had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. That radio, equipment you modified, he said quickly. Can it broadcast on their frequencies too? Zirath's golden eyes widened with understanding. Through their connection, he felt her racing thoughts as she considered the possibilities. Yes, she could modify it further, but what good would that do? Trust me, Marcus said, already moving toward the radio setup. I've got an idea. As bullets and energy blasts continued to exchange outside, Marcus grabbed the radio microphone while Zirath made rapid adjustments to broadcast on the soldiers' communication frequencies. When she nodded that they were ready, Marcus took a deep breath and pressed the transmit button. Attention alien forces, he said in his strongest, most authoritative voice. This is Commander Marcus of Earth Defense Command. There was a moment of shocked silence from outside. Even the human military forces seemed to pause, probably wondering who was claiming to command them. You are in violation of intergalactic law by attacking a pregnant refugee under official planetary protection, Marcus continued, making it up as he went along. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences of war with the Terran Federation. Through the crystal connection, he felt Zirath's amazement. She was translating his words into their language and adding subtle implications that made his bluff even more convincing. To the soldiers, it sounded like Earth was already part of some vast interstellar alliance. The lead soldier's response came back in accented but understandable English, clearly using some kind of translation device. Impossible. This world has no space-capable technology. You are primitives, are we? Marcus replied, looking directly at Zirath as he spoke. Then explain how we detected your ships before they entered our system. Explain how we've been monitoring your communications since you arrived. This was pure bluff based on Hollywood movies and science fiction novels. But through their connection, Zirath was feeding him technical terms that made it sound convincing. She was also broadcasting false sensor readings that suggested massive hidden installations beneath the farm. Furthermore, Marcus continued, the being you're hunting is now under the protection of the Terran Zirathi Alliance. Any hostile action against her will be considered an act of war against both our species. The silence outside stretched longer this time. Through the windows, Marcus could see the alien soldiers huddled together, clearly arguing among themselves. Their red eyes kept darting toward the sky as if expecting more ships to appear at any moment. Marcus held his breath, knowing that everything depended on the next few minutes. Either his insane bluff was going to work, or they were all about to find out just how outgunned Earth really was. But through the crystal connection, he felt something new from Zirath, hope mixed with profound admiration. She had traveled across the galaxy, met countless species, and seen wonders beyond human imagination. But she had never encountered anything quite like this, a primitive farmer who was willing to declare his entire species allied with hers, based on nothing more than the principle that protecting pregnant beings was the right thing to do. In that moment, Marcus realized he wasn't just trying to save Zirath anymore. He was potentially determining humanity's first impression on the galactic community, and he was going to make sure it was a good one. The radio crackled with static before the lead soldier's voice came through again, this time with obvious uncertainty. You claim alliance with the exile Zirath. Prove this claim. Marcus's heart sank. He'd been hoping the bluff would be enough. But these soldiers were clearly too experienced to be fooled by words alone. He looked at Zirath desperately, and through their crystal connection, felt her sudden surge of determination. She moved to the radio with surprising speed and began speaking in her own language, her voice carrying authority that made the barn seem to vibrate with power. Through their connection, Marcus understood what she was saying, and it took his breath away. Zirath wasn't just any explorer. She was the daughter of the High Council leader, one of the most important figures in their civilization. Her exile hadn't been punishment. It had been a diplomatic mission to make first contact with promising new species. Earth was supposed to be evaluated for potential membership in their galactic community. The soldiers outside had made a catastrophic mistake. They belonged to a rival faction that opposed peaceful expansion, preferring conquest and subjugation. By attacking Zirath and threatening her human protector, they had committed an act of treason that would bring the full weight of the galactic authorities down on them. Marcus felt the soldiers' shock through Zirath's translation of their responses. They had thought they were hunting a common criminal, not the council leader's daughter on an official mission. The human Marcus has shown the courage and honor that marks a true ally, Zirath continued, her voice growing stronger. He risked his life to protect a stranger, asking nothing in return. He has proven that his species possesses the qualities we seek in galactic citizenship. Through the crystal connection, Marcus felt the absolute truth of her words. This had all been a test, not planned, but emerged through circumstances. His simple act of kindness to a starving being had evolved into humanity's first contact exam. And somehow, impossibly, he had passed. The lead soldier's voice came back one final time, now filled with fear rather than arrogance. We were misinformed about your status, Princess Zirath. We withdraw our claim and request safe passage to depart this system. Denied, came a new voice from the sky, speaking in perfect English with an accent that sounded like music. By order of the High Council, you will remain to face judgment for your crimes. Marcus rushed to the barn windows and looked up in amazement. A ship was descending through the clouds, but this one was nothing like the soldiers' vessels. It was massive, easily the size of a city block, and its hull seemed to be made of the same living crystal as Zirath's communication device. It moved with impossible grace for something so large, settling into the sky above his farm like a gentle giant. Through the crystal connection, Marcus felt Zirath's overwhelming relief and joy. Her people had received her distress signal and traveled, faster than should have been possible to reach Earth. The cavalry hadn't just arrived, it was her cavalry, smaller. Ships began emerging from the mother vessel, surrounding the soldiers who had threatened them. Marcus watched in fascination as the hostile aliens were taken into custody without a shot being fired. Their weapons simply stopped working, and they found themselves unable to move as some kind of energy field held them immobile. Attention Terran forces, the musical voice called from above. We are the Zirathi Exploration Council. We thank you for protecting our representative and request permission to land for formal first contact protocols. Marcus heard the radio chatter from the military helicopters, confusion and excitement mixing as officers tried to figure out how to respond to humanity's first official alien contact. Finally, a general's voice came through clearly. Unknown vessel, you have permission to land. We welcome you to Earth. Zirath made a sound that Marcus had come to recognize as laughter. Through their connection, he felt her amusement at the humans' attempts to maintain military protocol while confronting something completely outside their experience. I need to tell them what happened, Zirath said, speaking English for the first time. Her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. My people must understand what you did. What I did was just basic human decency, Marcus replied, though he was still reeling from hearing her speak his language. Anyone would have done the same. No, Zirath said, placing a gentle clawed hand on his shoulder. That is what makes your species special. You believe anyone would do the right thing because you cannot imagine doing otherwise. We have searched the galaxy for generations seeking races with that quality. Through the barn windows, Marcus could see one of the crystalline ships landing gently in his cornfield, its landing gear barely disturbing the plants. A ramp extended from its side, and figures began emerging. Beings like Zyraath, but wearing flowing robes that seemed to be made of captured starlight. "The council will want to meet you," Zyraath continued. "There will be ceremonies, negotiations, treaties. Earth is about to become part of something much larger than you can imagine." Marcus felt a moment of panic. He was just a farmer from Iowa. He didn't know anything about diplomacy or galactic politics. "I don't think I'm the right person for something that important." "You are exactly the right person," Zyraath assured him. "You proved that when you stepped between me and those weapons without hesitation. You proved it again when you declared your species allied with mine, based on nothing more than the principle that it was right." Through their crystal connection, Marcus felt the depth of her gratitude and respect. But he also felt something else: the weight of responsibility for representing all of humanity to a galactic community that judged species based on the actions of individuals. "What happens now?" he asked, watching as the Ziraathi delegation approached the barn, followed by nervous but curious human military officers. "Now," Ziraath said with a smile that was beautiful despite her reptilian features, "you get to show the galaxy what it truly means to be human, and I get to prepare for motherhood knowing my children will grow up in a universe where humans and Ziraathi stand together as friends." Marcus took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. His grandfather had always said that when life gives you more than you think you can handle, you handle it anyway. It looked like he was about to get a chance to prove that humans were worthy of their place among the stars. As the first Ziraathi delegate reached the barn doors, Marcus stepped forward to greet them, one hand resting on the crystal device that had connected him to Ziraath. "Ready to begin the next chapter of human history,"